If Kansas has a great season, what areas or why? What are the biggest strengths and weaknesses coming into this season based on the current roster that Bill Self has built for the Kansas Jayhawks basketball team?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making your first listen every day, and thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode of the show, whether it's through our YouTube page, which you can like and subscribe to. Hit that subscribe button. Certainly helps us out, or anywhere free and available that you get your audio side of things with the podcast. Today's episode of the show, we're going to be talking the top strengths and weaknesses, as well as maybe some areas that I think are kind of in limbo, can go either way for KU for the 2025 to 2026 Kansas Jayhawks basketball team that's been built through the offseason now for Bill Self and company. We'll start with the strengths, get to the weaknesses, and then finish up with areas that, I think maybe are a little bit more TBD, to be determined for KU. Let's start with the strengths right here. I think the biggest strength that I look at coming into this season for KU, I've talked about this one before. I guess theoretically I could just say having Darryn Peterson, and maybe you would add Flory to that to say like having a 1-2 combo, having a 1-2 punch, having a superstar in Darryn Peterson, having your superstar be a guard. Guards win in March. Guards have the ball. It's harder to double team a guard than it is like a big man down in the post, right? That's probably the biggest strength. But outside of that, from a team identity perspective, from a team orientation, I think it's their size, length, and athleticism. Now, I'm grouping this all together in one thing because they're all kind of physical traits, right? The size, the length, the wingspan, your quickness, your speed, your athleticism. It's all kind of a physical nature of things. But I think Kansas could really excel in this area. And I think it kind of branches off in a lot of different ways and how it can manifest itself as making an impact on the basketball court for KU. And I think they're all kind of sides of the same coin, just different. Obviously, they are all different terms. They mean different things, but they represent similar things, right? Like if you're a lengthy team, an athletic team, probably means you're going to be good in transition and on defense, right? And a lot of times those things kind of go together. But I look at the combination of all three of those, right? Having size, having length, having athleticism, and I immediately see like they should be a good rebounding team this upcoming season. Previous episode, we've talked about areas that Kansas should be better, or Kansas might be worse, or Kansas should be around the same from where they were a season ago. And one of those areas that we talked about, think of everydayers who already caught that episode, right, is rebounding the basketball. Kansas this past season finished 65th in the country in defensive rebound rate, so they were good at it, 4th in Big 12 only play. Offensive rebound rate, not great, 10th in Big 12 only play, 163rd in the country. And as we talked about earlier, Bill Self, when he has a top 50 offensive rebound rate offense, for the most part, like 7 of the last 9 times his teams have done that, he's had a top 10 overall offense in the country. So if you can get those extra possessions, you can get offensive rebounds, a lot of times it leads to a more efficient offense. Well, okay, having good size, having good length, having good wingspan, having good athleticism to jump for. And that's the other thing here that I don't know that I've dove in too much enough into, but like for so many years, Kansas, it wasn't just that Kansas had like all Big 12 level guards and that they could score and create and shoot threes and stuff. For so many years, Kansas has had like guards that can also rebound. Like I think about Frank Mason getting you 4 or 5 rebounds per game. And sure, it's not the same Frank Mason getting 4 or 5 rebounds per game as Flory Badunga or Cole Aldridge or somebody getting double-digit rebounds per game, but they add up. And having guards that can go do that. Kansas really had, like, when you're throwing out a lineup last year of DeJuan Harris and Rylan Griffin at the 2, that's a combined, 3 rebounds per game for the two of them, So, like, you're not really getting that added element, and that 1 or 2 extra rebounds can be the difference in you being a more elite team. So I think it should manifest itself there. I think the size and the length part of this, I guess you would say the athleticism too, staying in front of guys, but I think specifically the size and the length should lead to you having a good 2-point defense, right? And again, kind of involved in that should be being a team who gets a lot of blocked shots, and that will help your 2-point defense. Kansas was actually pretty good at both of those last year, 33rd in block rate, 21st in 2-point rate defense against them. I do think Kansas might be a little more prone to like the post up this year than they were a season ago, but then again, maybe Kansas just counters by doubling a little bit more and they force more turnovers off of it, right? But I think Kansas is going to be good at both of those because of their athleticism, and also recovery speed matters in some of that as well. I think the length specifically should lead to a lot of dunks and an efficient 2-point offense, right? I think that could be the name of the game for the KU offense outside of, some stuff from, I don't know, Darryn Peterson and some of your perimeter guards. Like, it could be dunks, and more dunks, right? Fleury's going to throw down a bunch of dunks. Paul Mbia is probably going to have a lot of dunks. You're going to get some of these wings and guards cutting to the rim that end up with dunks or in transition that lead to just that. I think Kansas is going to get a lot of those at the end of the day here. I think the positional size, that should be something that should allow KU to be a very switchable defense. And as much as you look at this past season and say, well, I mean, Kansas actually finished 11th in the country in defensive efficiency on KenPom. They were 20th the year before. So as much as the last 2 seasons haven't been great up to Bill Self and KU standards, they still had top 20 defenses both seasons. And that was with a lot of, debates, complaining, whatever you want to call it, about what was Hunter Dickinson's defense. And, I remained to say that, like, okay, if you had Hunter in a one-on-one in a post-up, like, he was a good defender because he was just gigantic. Where he ran into problems was teams that could space you out a little bit more. Now, not every team's going to be able to take advantage of that matchup. Here's the beauty of this Kansas team, though. I think last year's team in certain matchups could be a great defense, but there are other matchups where they couldn't. This year, I think they're more malleable. This year, I think they are more malleable, the right word, pliable, maybe is the right word here. I think they're more flexible in what they can do. Like this year, I think no matter what the matchup that comes at them, I think they can figure out a way based on the lineup and who's playing to be good against that specific matchup. I think they have. So maybe in the overall numbers, they finish similarly, but you have a higher floor game to game in what you could possibly be. I also do think it has a higher ceiling, though, on the defensive end than last year. And the big reason why is Flory Badunga in the middle. And then, yeah, you do have a bunch of perimeter size all over the floor, basically, than you did, this past season when even the guys who were like with Ryland Griffin and AJ Storr, their wing size at 6'6", 6'7", but both of them are known for not being very good defenders, and Zeke Mayo, who's got good size for a guard, 6'4", 6'5". But if you were saying what's one of more his weaknesses of the game, it would be the defensive end. This year, you're replacing that with Melvin Council, who one of his strengths is the defensive end. Marco Jackson coming back from injury is a good defender. Jaden Dawson is a good defender. Trey White is a positive defender, right? So you just see it in a lot of ways. And the positional size, it allows you to be switchable. It allows you to be versatile as a defense. If you need to play 2 bigs, you can play, Flory next to Bryson Tiller. I guess you could play Flory next to Paul Mbia. I don't know how that would work on the offensive end, but you could do it if you had to in a specific matchup. You can play the Super Bowl switchable lineup where Flory's at the 5. You can play the kind of drop coverage lineup where Paul Mbia is at the 5. You can just do a lot of different things on the defensive end. You can have somebody guard 94 feet with Marco or Melvin Council, or maybe both of them, right? I think there's a lot of fun things Kansas and Bill Self are going to be able to do on the defensive end of the floor that sometimes we think of the schematics and the play calling mostly on the offensive end, but there is a lot more schematics that goes into the defensive end than you might think. And I think Bill Self's going to definitely take advantage of that with this year's team. The athleticism, I think, should also lead to a better slashing team, right? It should lead to more speed and quickness overall, which obviously is going to help defensively, help you stay in front of guys. I think it's going to help create more chaos in passing lanes. Last year's Kansas team was not good in forcing turnovers, 286th in the country in turnover rate defense, 253rd in the country in steal rate defense. Year before that, they were 207th in the country in turnover rate defense and 103rd in the country in steal rate defense. But for so many years, Bill Self has, maybe he's not been, Bill Self or Bob Huggins, press Virginia, where they're just forcing an incredible amount of turnovers every game. But you go back to 2023, they were 65th in the country in turnover rate defense. You look at some of his teams that had guards that could really pressure you, and maybe his early tenure, right? That 07 team was 42nd in the country. The 08 team was 115th. They've at least been above average. They've been solid at it, and they've gotten away from that the last couple of years. I think they'll get back to that this year because of those things. And the slashing, I think, matters too, that I think Kansas is going to be harder to keep out of the lane this year. And I think that'll maybe open them up a little bit more because they'll have more drive and kick opportunities than the past couple of seasons. I also think again, this is all one thing, that athleticism and quickness. I think it's going to show itself in dribble driving and in general, like driving by your man, being able to create your own shot on offense a little bit more this year. And I would think that's also going to help Kansas get to the free throw line a lot more, because that's an area that they were certainly one of the worst teams in the country a season ago. And then obviously it should lead to more transition play. Kansas during Big 12 play last year was a below average team transition nationally, scoring the basketball there. They need to find more opportunities to get transition play, and typically Bill Self teams are great in transition. I think they'll be able to do that this year based on their archetype. The other parts of this is I also think ball handling, right? I mean, you're going to have certain lineups. Like there might be a lineup that they go with Peterson, Elmarco, and Council for big minutes for Kansas. That's basically three guys who can play the point guard if you're Kansas. Even if you're throwing, I mean, Jaden Dawson could handle it a little bit for a 2 for Loyola last year. Like there's just going to be a lot of ball handling on the floor at all times for KU. And I think that's going to be a positive to calming you down, where it's not just one or two guys that can do it. It's like you have a bunch of guys that can kind of, take it up or initiate the offense and do some of the chop play stuff that Bill Self has, where it's like, who's going to take it? Who's going to, be initiating here? And I think Bill Self's going to have a lot of fun schematically with this roster and the kind of flexibility that they're going to provide on both ends of the floor. All right, what are some areas, though, that could be weaknesses for this upcoming KU basketball roster that might hold them back of their potential ceiling and what they want to become this season? We'll get to that next. This is Locked on Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Game Time. You'll be able to use Game Time to get KU basketball tickets before you know it here, a couple months from now. Guess what, 3 months? Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merchandise, or even an invite for a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Seat views right in the app before you buy, so you know exactly where you're going to be and what your view is going to look like. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. Don't forget you can make a Locked on College football or Locked on College basketball your second listen every day here. Okay, what are some of the weaknesses that could be around this KU basketball roster? Because I do think they're going to be better than they were last year. I think they're going to be better than they were 2 seasons ago. I guess you could make the argument, when they were healthy with Kevin McCullough. That's another argument that we don't need to make. Anyway, what are some of the weaknesses for this year's team? I think the biggest one is going to be the three-point shooting, right? And there's a chance this ends up being okay for Kansas. If Elmarco Jackson is much improved from 3, as a third-year player, he was closer to 27% as a freshman. If he's closer to that this year, it gets a little difficult, because then you'd be talking about Council, who's kind of a career 29% three-point shooter. You'd be talking about Jackson, who, if he's in the 20s from 3, you start to lose out on spacing. Obviously, Flory's not a shooter. Trey White can hit an open 3 here or there, but, it's 32%, right, on low volume. You start to have those questions. The flip side, though, if Elmarco does, kind of break out and have a 34%, 35% three-point year? What if Council is up to 30, 31%? What if Darryn Peterson is shooting really well from 3? What if Jaden Dawson's giving you, 36, 37, 38%? What if Cole Rosario is in the rotation and giving you some streaky shooting where there's certain games where he just kind of can't miss? Then it becomes more of just this is just, it's not necessarily something I would view as a strength, but it's not going to kill you either. That's kind of the range of where you're hoping to get if you're Kansas. I don't ever think it's going to be they're not going to be 2018 Villanova, but can you just make it where it's not a weakness, where it's just kind of it's just a thing. It's just something you do. You're not great at it. You're not bad at it. It's just there, right? And then that allows your other strengths to kind of come to the forefront a little bit more. That'll be, I think, the goal for KU this season. But that is a question that right now could be a little bit of a weakness for this team. And we had an episode yesterday. Thank you, that everydayers who already caught us, kind of comparing this team to how they've been built so far to maybe last year's Michigan State team that made it to the Elite Eight. And the shooting is one of those things that maybe held Michigan State back from being a 1 seed, maybe held them back from making a Final Four, winning a national title, right? I think Kansas can be better than that team. Go back and watch that episode. But, is it going to be good enough to make a Final Four, win a national title if you're Kansas, right? I think another area I look to as being a possible weakness is, okay, so they might be a better like all-around ball handling team. And they were last season, like as I was talking about, like you compare to last year's team and it's like, okay, Rylan Griffin's not really like a ball handler on last year's team on the wing. I know KJ Adams could dribble it a little bit in transition, but he's not really like a ball handler, right? You had DeJuan Harris, you had Zeke Mayo, you had Diggy Coit off the bench. Like those were really your three ball handlers that you played if you're Kansas. This year's team might start three next to each other at the same point in time with El Marco, Darryn Peterson, and Melvin Council, right? And so I look at it and say, okay, I think there's more ball handling on this year's team all the way around, but I don't know if they're going to be as good of a passing team as they were last season. You look at it last year, they were 16th in the country in assist to field goal made rate. Now, that can be one of those a little bit deceiving numbers where it's like you want to have a high ratio of assist to made field goals because that tells you that you're sharing the rock well. That tells you that you're getting open looks for players and passing to them. But you almost don't want it to be too high. And I think Kansas was in a range last year and really the year before where they were too high. Again, 16th in the country in assist to field goal made rate last year. They were first in the country in 2024. The reason you want to be good at it is, again, you want to have a team that's sharing the ball and is getting each other open looks. The reason you don't want to be elite at it is because if you're elite at it, that doesn't just tell you that you're passing and getting open looks. Sometimes it can tell a story of, oh, nobody can create their own shot. Nobody can create for themselves. The only way we can score, the only way we can make a shot is if somebody else sets me up or passes me the ball. And that's a tough way to live on the offensive end, right? That's a tough way to live over and over, especially once you get to March Madness. If you can never, like, you want to be able to do that stuff and play great team basketball all the time. You want that to be your identity, but there's going to be certain times where teams guard you really well. There's going to be times where teams scout you really well and they snuff it out and they know exactly what you're about to run. And you have to have some dudes that can be a dude and go get their own bucket. Okay, Kansas has that on this year's team. So that is something where it's a little bit misleading there. But again, you're talking about last year's team that, the last couple of years been really good passing teams, like DeJuan Harris, good passer, KJ Adams, good passer, Zeke Mayo was at least a solid passer, Hunter Dickinson was a good passer, very good outlet passer for the big man spot. I don't know if they're going to have as much passing overall, but they might not have to, right? Because they do have more guys that can create their own shot. But it is something that I wanted to talk about and throw up here. The last one here is center foul trouble. Did you know Flory Badunga averaged the same amount of fouls per game as Hunter Dickinson? And yes, Hunter Dickinson played more minutes by a pretty sizable margin than what Flory Badunga did this past season. You bring in Paul Mbia, and what's the rap on Paul Mbia? It's that he's a very lengthy, long center who has a very high potential. But when you're talking about a center in Paul Mbia who is kind of seen as being a little bit more of a raw prospect, what do raw center prospects typically do? They foul too much. So if you have a situation where Flory and Mbia are in foul trouble, then your only big remaining is Bryson Tiller, who's also a young big man who, again, young big men tend to foul a little bit more. So that is the one big question for me. And that's why as Kansas, you still have an opportunity to maybe add another player. Do you just try to add a body, another big man, right? Even if it's somebody who you don't really expect to play or want to play, it at least just give you another body out there. I don't know. Maybe that would be something that they'd be interested in if the right situation kind of arises or pops up to them. But that is one question that I have. Like, can these guys stay out of foul trouble? At least can one of them be good? I'm not saying you need to be as good at it as Hunter did, but can you, especially in the vein of like, okay, Hunter breads his butter by scoring and rebounding. And so you don't want him picking up those fouls. Whereas with Flory, he's breading his butter by rebounding and blocking shots and playing defense. So it's going to be more prone to possibly getting fouls. Like that is, I think, one of the weaknesses or questions coming into this year's team for KU. What are some areas, though, that are to be determined that I think can maybe sway either way of are they going to be strength? Are they going to be weakness? We'll get to that next. This is Locked on Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning for a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And sometimes spending can add up quick. I just had a bunch of car repairs that I had to do. Don't go with the dealership. Go find a local place because it's going to be a lot cheaper. But you're still looking to like, okay, this is a lot of money. I got to move over money from this account to that account. It can be stressful, man. Like that's the beauty of Monarch Money. You take control of your finances. You use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Again, take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Thanks for joining us again on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks, and check out Locked On College Football as we get closer to the season. We are, from this past Saturday, 5 weeks away from week 0. So that means we're in closing on 4 weeks away from the start of the KU football season. I love that it's week 0. We get just a little bit closer and get to fill that thirst for college football and KU football coming up a little closer. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the show here on Locked On Jayhawks so you're catching up with everything leading up to the KU football season. Okay, what are some areas TBD, to be determined? Are they going to be strengths? Are they going to be weaknesses for this KU men's basketball team? The first would be post-up scoring ability. Now, to be clear, this is not, I know I've been comparing to last season, but that some of that is just for like reference point. I don't think they're going to be as good as post-up scoring as they were last year. In fact, I feel very confident that the last 2 years' teams are going to be better at post-up scoring than this Kansas team is. Hunter Dickinson is better at post-up scoring than anybody on this Kansas roster. I feel confident in saying that. However, if we're just talking about in generalities compared to the rest of college basketball this season, we're not comparing this year to last year. Will Kansas be at least an average post-up scoring team? I mean, for one, we know Bill Self still does want to throw the ball in the post if he can, right? And I think that as much as I think of Flory as mostly a guy who's going to throw down dunks, there were some plays there, man, where you could throw him the ball on the block and you saw some of the athleticism, you saw some of the footwork, you saw some of the potential of him kind of working off a pivot foot and working under the rim and getting himself an easier layup as opposed to having to take a hook shot. So I do think there's a little more there than maybe he gets credit for. Again, not saying he's going to be, Morris Twin or Hunter Dickinson, but can he at least show a little bit something? Yeah, I do think that's the case. And again, Bill Self is going to want to go that way if he possibly can. Paul Mbia, maybe a little bit more of a raw prospect, but you watch some of his highlights, like he's doing a lot of post-up work. So that's going to kind of be a part of the game. And if Bryson Tiller's in there, like that is what he is more known for, being kind of a finesse big man who can face up and can post up and do some different things there. So you could convince me that those players are all raw and it's not really going to be something KU uses. But I also definitely think it's something they're going to use more than like the 2023 team that was rotating like Ernest Uday and KJ Adams as center. I think it's going to be more than that, but it'll obviously be less than the last 2 years. So that'll be kind of TBD and will mostly depend on A, how raw is Paul Mbia, and B, like how much improvement does Flory Badunga have over the offseason in that specific area. The other area TBD is experience playing together. And I guess overall in college basketball, right? I mean, you're talking about bringing in 3 new transfers. You're talking about bringing in an international player in Paul Mbia. You're talking about bringing on a bunch of freshmen with Darryn Peterson. And I guess Tiller's been around the team, but Cole Rosario, like there's a lot of new faces into the Kansas basketball program that they are going to have to kind of figure out how to play with each other, especially with the additions of Rosario and Mbia being later in the game, where they're going to have to kind of do that on the fly a little bit more. So even the returning guys for KU, like Marco Jackson just missed the season. And how many of the guys on the current roster has Marco even like been on the court with? Was he on the court at any point with Jamari McDowell? But it's like, is McDowell going to even be in the rotation for KU? He wasn't on the court when Flory was here last year. So even though they're both returners, they've never actually played together in a real game with each other, right? He's Calderon, Corbin Tiller, those are both freshmen. So it's not a roster that has played, a single minute? I don't think any. That's crazy. KU has, because the returning players are Flory, Elmarco, Jamari McDowell, and technically Bryson Tiller. But none of those guys, except for maybe Elmarco and Jamari McDowell, I'm sure they logged some sort of minutes together, but it's probably very limited, have played any minutes on the court next to each other. So again, that's something you can overcome. That's more common nowadays in college basketball with the way that rosters move and change so much quicker now. But that will be a big question. Will that matter in any way for KU? And then the last one I have here, which this one's TBD, are they missing having one more dude to be able to kind of create for you, especially somebody who can create and score, right? Like not having that Darryn Williams, not having that Dame Sarr, not having that Keyshawn Hall. Are they missing having one more guy where it's like, if you had that one more guy, it would open things even more up for Darryn Peterson, even more up for Fleur Badunga. Now teams can key even more on one of those players. Is that something they're missing? Or does somebody step up where it's like, that is clearly KU's third best player? Or Marco Jackson has a breakout season. Melvin Council has his most efficient scoring season. Jaden Dawson shooting 40% from three. Whatever path it takes to get there, is Kansas able to overcome that? And it doesn't matter. Kansas is a top 10, top 8 team in the country anyway? Or is it something we're going to look back on and it's like, yeah, Kansas got a 4 seed. They were solid. They were better than they were last year. But it's like they were just missing that one piece. That will be TBD as well. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. See you next time for another edition of Locked on Jayhawks.